Having just mentioned third-party data, I just wanted to give a few examples of that to further explain what I'm talking about. As I mentioned before, one really common example is census type data. Nearly every government, at least of any country of any size, has an organization that collects census data from its citizens. There's also lots of other types of government data in most countries. So that's one possible source of third-party data. Another example would be data from non-governmental organizations. So this could be the OECD, the UN, the World Bank, UNICEF, all kinds of non-governmental organizations collect data. For example, the OECD collects a lot of comparative data from all of the member countries. So you can see how many internet connections there are per capita in one country compared to another and things like that. That's an example of third-party data from non-governmental organizations. Another example of third-party data is industry data. So I mentioned Nielsen before, they do media reports, but lots of other industry associations have data about what's going on in that industry. So it might be a manufacturers association and they're collecting data about things like employment trends in manufacturing or productivity improvements or cost increases and things like that in manufacturing. We might see the same sort of thing for retail organizations or pharmaceutical organizations or pretty much any industry you can name. It's often the industry bodies will collect data about those industries. Sometimes, too, there'll be outside analyst firms who collect and sometimes sell industry data. A common example of this is the technology industry. So we hear about companies like IDC and Gartner and Forrester that track the technology industry and either sell that data directly or use it for consulting purposes. Another source of third-party data is Google Trends data. What Google Trends data does is it looks at searches that have been done in Google and it just tracks those over time to see if all of a sudden there's a spike in trends looking at a specific topic. This can happen if there's something in the news or something like that. All of a sudden people are searching for things that they hadn't been searching for before. Another example of third-party data, as I mentioned already, would be the Twitter API. So API is Application Program Interface, and all that's doing is it's saying, hey, Twitter, find me all the tweets about this particular topic that happened in these locations and in this time frame. And as I mentioned before, often third-party data is actively collected. The first three here would be examples of that. But the last two are passively collected qualitative data, but are then being turned into quantitative data. So in the case of Google Trends, we're counting how often a particular thing is searched for and comparing it to the historical track record for searches for that term or that word. With the Twitter API, we're going from the words in the tweet to something like topics and sentiment and things like that.